How ending mining would change the world. If you can't grow it, you have to mine it, goes the miner's credo. The extraction of minerals, metals and fuels from the ground is one of humankind's oldest industries. And our appetite for it is growing. Society is more dependent on both greater variety and larger volumes of mined substances than ever before. If you live in a middle-income country, every year you use roughly 17 tons of raw materials, equivalent to the weight of 3 elephants and twice as much as 20 years ago. For a person in a high-income country, it is 26 tons, or 4.5 elephants worth. Extracting new materials continues to be cheaper than reuse for many substances, leading some experts to sound the warning about the increasing pressure of mines on the natural world. A growing chorus is concerned that environmental toll of mine-caused pollution and biodiversity loss, as well as the social impacts caused to local communities, could sometimes outweigh the benefits of mining. But what if we stopped extraction of fossil fuels and minerals entirely? What if, in order to better protect the environment, humanity decided the contents of the Earth's crust were off limits? Workers in the Democratic Republic of Congo's deep cobalt pits would drop their shovels. Colossal bucket wheels in Germany's brown coal mines would cease to strip mine. It's an unlikely scenario, to be sure, and one that would cause hardship for many people, particularly if it happened suddenly. But imagining a world without access to the underground allows us to examine how dependent we have become on this ongoing extraction. It also invites us to consider the frivolousness with which we often then throw these materials away, and to examine the overlooked potential in this waste as a source of new materials. So could considering the end of mining help to change how we use materials today? Victor Moz, a researcher in geoinformatics and sustainability at the University of Economics and Business in Vienna, Austria, has spent the last 3 years poring over satellite images of the Earth's surface to estimate the total area humans currently give over to mining. The results surprised him. It's a country-sized area, and that's just with the mines that are reported, he says. The environmental case for buying a coal mine. The land size of mining had never been surveyed by satellite before, making it tricky to train a computer how to identify mines from thousands of photos. Moz and his team therefore had no choice but to make his estimates by eye, and spent hours tracing polygons around the shapes of open pits, shafts and waste tailings ponds. I was seeing polygons in my sleep, he says. Above ground, he found mining sites covered around 100,000 square kilometers, 38,600 square miles, larger than Austria or 5 times the size of Wales. And that's just the mines that are active, says Moz. Mining is also one of the most basic forms of enterprise, and many locations are unreported. In reality, the world's total mining area is even larger. In a world of no mining, ghost towns would be created almost overnight. On the first day of a world that stopped mining, the activity across this collective expanse would grind to a halt. Workers in the Democratic Republic of Congo's deep cobalt pits would drop their shovels. Colossal bucket wheels in Germany's brown coal mines would cease to strip mine, and the small boats in the Mekong Delta would stop sucking up sands. The first shockwave would be to jobs. Across the world, ending mining would terminate an estimated 4 million formal jobs in the industry. And the toll wouldn't stop there. There's a number of further people that rely indirectly on mining sites that would make it greater, says Eleonore Lever, who researches the social impacts of mining from the University of Queensland. More than 100 million livelihoods in work connected to artisanal mining, groups and individuals that mine on smaller scale, often informally, would be lost. Lever's research has involved studying the effect of mine closure on towns in remote Australia. In rural areas, where there might have been mining operations for decades, you have communities that have grown to depend on them. In a world of no mining, ghost towns would be created almost overnight. These impacts wouldn't stay confined to those communities for long. By day 7, massive ripples would be felt in society. Energy would be the chief worry, says John Thompson, a mining consultant and professor of sustainability based in Vancouver. And coal would be the first to go. Coal is heavy and bulky, so it moves around the world in short supply chains, often going straight from mine to power plant. Because it takes up so much space, power stations don't have much to rely on in terms of stockpiles, he says. The constant conveyor belt would empty very quickly if mining came to an end. With 35% of the world still relying on coal for electricity, few countries would escape a sudden energy crisis. However, coal use for electricity generation is not equal the world over. It is 15% in Europe, 63% in China and 84% in South Africa, so energy inequality between countries would soon be felt. To cope with this cutoff from electricity, governments might begin looking to the past. The UK's mining strikes of the 1970s, where rolling blackouts and electricity rations were enforced, could be used as a form of damage control. The 3-day week policy could make a comeback, says Thompson, referring to how the UK government reduced working and manufacturing to 3 days instead of 5 to handle the electricity shortage from the strikes and the oil crisis of 1973. An indirect, but crippling effect of such electricity drops in the modern day would be the cut to communications. The internet, many of whose servers still rely on coal-powered electricity, would be slashed or reduced. Mobile phone networks might hang on for longer, but with less electricity in the grid, charging devices could become a luxury. Corded landlines, which are connected to centralized telephone exchanges, would last longest, at least as long as backup generators and batteries could keep them going. We mine vastly more sand than anything, Aurora Taurus. Soon after, bulky materials would become scarce. Stocks of sand and gravel, which are essential ingredients for making concrete, are relatively shallow. Reserves of the two would be depleted within 2 to 3 weeks, says Thompson. Sand and gravel are the most mined solid materials by mass, says Aurora Taurus, who researches the environmental pressures of sand use at the Catholic University of Louvain, Belgium. We mine vastly more sand than anything. The union estimates we get through 40 to 50 billion tons of sand per year. There is some capacity to recycle used concrete, but the rate at which we use fresh concrete far outstrips current recycling rates. There would also be quality concerns. Most recycled concrete is downcycled to lower grade uses such as road building, says Taurus. So while there would be a rush to implement better recycling processes, in the short term, the building of new homes would plummet. Meanwhile, the temperature in existing homes would become increasingly uncomfortable as gas stores began depleting after a handful of weeks, reducing power for heating and cooling. In economies that rely on gas-fired power stations for electricity such as the United Arab Emirates, 95%, Russia, 45%, the US, 41% and the UK, 36%, blackouts would become more frequent. Any plastics production able to remain working would be restricted to recyclables as its gas feedstock disappeared. But there is more to modern society than energy and buildings. It's after about 2 months that things would get really interesting, as the mining halt would hit metals, says Thompson. Many mined metals are traded through exchanges in London and New York, where numbers and figures swapped over the trading floor denote the real-life movement of physical stockpiles between warehouses all over the world. For copper, an excellent conductor which is essential for almost all electronics, stockpiles would dwindle to nothing in around 6 to 10 weeks, Thompson estimates. This would lead the price of metals to skyrocket. It's not hard to imagine that theft would increase at this point, says Thompson. When the copper price rose to all-time highs in the 2010s, crime rose with it. Buildings, street lamps, train lines, anything with copper in, were stripped of their cables for resale. Theft might increase for all the industrial metals, copper, iron, aluminium, zinc, lead and nickel, which by mass account for 98% of all mined metals. The shortage would reveal how much this handful of metals have become the lifeblood of society. The production of petrol, diesel, plastics and road asphalt would come to end. And with them, the fossil fuel age.